Good morning, and welcome to another edition, episode, whatever you want to call it, of Hidden in the Heartland. I am Kels Goodman. I am here in Provo, Utah, behind the Zion Curtain, if you want to call it that. And even though I don't feel very restricted, but whatever. And across the galaxy here is from the land of the Nephites is Mark Burris. So welcome, Mark. It's good to see you again today.
Good to see you too. It feels like it was only yesterday.
It
But
feels like it, and it might have been, but we're not going to reveal that. So
who
it
knows
might have
when
been
we do these,
Halloween
you know?
yesterday. It might have been Halloween. So, and that's why I'm still, getting over all of the candy that I ended
Yeah.
up eating like
Yeah,
a bad
before we
boy.
started, Kels was, in fetal position holding himself. He's going through sugar
That's right.
withdrawal.
All those pains
So
of all those Reese's peanut butter cups, and oh my goodness. Oh, you gotta love it. So Halloween was fun. But today we're going to talk about the Gravecreekstone and Grave Creek as much as we are able to know. Obviously, like all research, it evolves and it new information is constantly being learned. And so if there's anything that you as a viewer or listener have to contribute, please do. And we would love
yeah.
to hear from you. And we also are grateful for all of you guys who have been watching and subscribing to the channel. It's growing, and so we have a lot more content we're hoping to bring to you. We're going to do a few more episodes, and then we're going to take the rest of the year off throughout December, throughout the holidays in December, and then we'll be back in the new year. But we do have a few more episodes here, and so stay with us, and then stay tuned. We hope to have guests and other things that we're going to talk about. But we could just read and research all day long, and we'll continue to find new stuff. And that's why it's an ongoing process. And so we all learn together by all of us amateurs. Today, I'm going to go ahead and do a little swampity swap, and we're going to go ahead and go into, whoops, there's the end of my program. Subscribe and like and share and help us make
Yeah,
season 3.
dude.
Just remember that from the beginning. So that's what we're going to do. But we're actually going to talk about the Gravecreekstone. So there's that smooth transition to my keynote. So anyway, the Gravecreek stone is going to be what we talk about today. And I knew very little about this. Mark, had you ever heard of the Gravecreekstone before this
Oh no,
study at all?
I didn't know anything about the mound there. It's a really cool story. And I I I have one of those, I don't know, that map that was created in like the 1800s where it shows all the different earthworks and mounds, the little red dots.
Yeah.
So like it it's looking at one of those little red dots and being able to read and listen to the story of what was found there. So it's really interesting. I've only known about a few mounds and what was found in them, and this is another compelling story. So
Yeah, and yeah, same here. I mean, it's again, there's all those red dots. It's like,
mhm.
who knows? There's so many stories behind them, and the this part of America is so filled that we just don't realize. And one thing to remember in your own research, one thing to remember is to be careful where you get the information from, and know that sometimes it's altered. Even this presentation that I'm going to show you had a few flaws in it. It's things that we kind of knew that were like that I would do other research somewhere else and go, no, it wasn't here, it was here, or it wasn't this year, it was that year, or it wasn't this person, it was another person. And that's just always going to happen. So you got to be fluid, and you got to be ready to shift and change and be okay with it, and make that part of your learning. I look forward to the day when we're all dead, right? And well, I don't look forward to dying, but I look
that
forward
that
to the
sounded
day.
really Halloweeny.
Now I'm having this post Halloween thought, and that is just learning, just opening the books of everything that might be during the millennium, who knows what, and but we know that we're going to learn so much, and I feel like that you want to have a good time in eternity, it's going to be learning, and so that's what we're looking forward to. The other thing is, yeah, you want to also be careful where you get your information from. I know one thing that when I go to, for most of us, our first place is YouTube. We go to YouTube or we go to Wikipedia, and so we have to kind of be careful where we get it. A lot of times you can't help but to go to YouTube and say, okay, just play me a video. That's what my wife does.
Yeah.
She just play me a video, and the videos you kind of have to be careful of, and it's not to knock the work that they have done for those videos, but it's the ones, and maybe you know what I'm talking about, Mark, are the ones that sound like there's a secret in America that's going to
They're
change. It's going to blow your
well,
mind.
well, something that you need to kind of always keep in mind is where is it coming from and what is the purpose of the video.
Yeah,
So a lot of YouTube, their purpose is to get views and likes, right? So
that's right.
they want it to be fantastical and to be mysterious. When you're reading an article, try to do a little bit of background research on who the person is. One thing that I've noticed is when they're translating stones, if you have an expert in one language, they may tell you, hey, that this is written in this language. You might have an expert in another language that says it's written in that language, but just try to see what people's backgrounds are and maybe where they're coming from.
Yeah,
Because that background perspective is definitely going to influence the research and what they read. And
yeah,
it's helpful to read multiple things, and to come up with what you feel on the matter and what your perspective is.
yeah,
Sometimes when you just read one, you're like, oh, okay, but there's more to the story.
yeah.
Someone
You've
else
always
might have
got to get
researched a little bit more.
always get a second source. That's exactly
Mhm.
right. Always get it from somewhere else. And yeah, so when you see, like I said, when you see those videos where they're like, this will change, a lot of what gets people are the thumbnails. The thumbnails are the little image that says this video is here. And in a lot of cases, the thumbnail is like, I have a friend who does a YouTube channel called Professor of Rock. And ironically, so if anybody's ever watched Professor of Rock, if you're into rock music, yes, I'm into rock music. He actually does it from Manti. He's actually a member of the church. He's actually a Heartlander too, which is amazing. And he does it out
Okay.
of an old home, one of Brigham's homes in Manti while they were building the temple. He lives in that, and he records Professor of Rock from his house, which is amazing. But his thumbnails are always these big letters. This song made this band change its history forever, or whatever. And it's always something to capture your interest, because that's how you get views. That's how you get people to click. And so a lot of times those thumbnails are things that are outlandish, sometimes not true. The Professor of Rock guy claims that every one of his thumbnails are true, and so he's like, I try to live up to the thumbnail. But a lot of people, they don't. They're not true, or they're over exaggerated, and they're not the truth, or they're partial truth. And so you have to be careful of those thumbnails. Our thumbnails for Hidden in the Heartland are not always exciting. Maybe I could make them a little more exciting, but it's usually me and Mark's faces with this
Yeah.
is what we're talking about, and that's pretty much
Yeah.
it. Because sometimes it's fascinating, but I don't have any mind-blowing stuff that we're presenting to you, just interesting stuff. So, but that kind of takes us to the gravecreekstone. Now, most of the people, like many of us, the first place we go to is Wikipedia. And so I went to Wikipedia and just pulled up the gravecreekstone. And Wikipedia is written by individuals, there's not experts back there fact checking everything on Wikipedia. They just aren't. And I'm on Wikipedia, and there was facts when I used to do Will It Blend, a YouTube channel. And when we got really famous and whatever, it would say that I worked for this company that doesn't exist. And the facts were like half wrong. And it was fascinating to hear, but I didn't know who wrote it, and I couldn't go in and change it. So just be careful of Wikipedia. Now, what is this wild and weird West Virginia thing? Okay, well, this is actually where we got some of our information from, and I'll explain. There's a woman who did a presentation who we got the information from. Her name is Emily Uldrich. So thank you to Emily Uldrich for the information that you provided for what we're going to be talking about today. She is a museum educator, and in 2022 they had an event called the Wild and Weird Con. That's what this is from the Wild and Weird West Virginia organization. They get into paranormal stuff. They get into, obviously they kind of get lumped into those things, which I'm sure are interesting. And they were at the Chief Logan Lodge in Logan, West Virginia. And so that's where this recording took place, just to kind of put it in a perspective. But the stuff that she said, there's a lot of factual stuff behind it. And some of it you can find
And I
factually.
don't let like what the event's name is sway you, because her presentation's a good presentation.
Exactly.
And she even mentions some researchers that do go into the weird paranormal realm, even with the artifact that we're talking about. But she did give a really good presentation. There were a few locations that were wrong in her presentation, but it was overall, it was a good.
Yeah. There were a few things. Like one of the things she got wrong was the gravecreekstone. She said it was found in one of the Carolinas, when we know it was in Tennessee. At least that's what we understand. And so just little things like that. But a lot of other stuff, you can turn around and find somewhere else. And that is what we highly recommend you do, is to do that. So let's dive into Grave Creek. So this is Moundsville, West Virginia. This is a great. Now, obviously, this isn't what it looks like today, but this was an early rendition. The Grave Creek was settled in 1770 by a gentleman named Joseph Tomlinson, and it's called Grave Creek because there was about 48 earthen mounds. Many of the mounds were actually Native American burials. And so where all the mounds went, besides the big one in the middle, we don't know. We have no idea if they were mowed down or if they were built on top or what they did. We have to remember that in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, it was survival, and it was also establishment. And so whether they mowed over it and just built their house over it, we're not going to judge them right now as to whether that was right or not. So that's not part of the discussion, obviously. The focus is that mound there does still exist, and it is preserved. And for that, we are grateful. But that is why it's called Grave Creek, is because of all of the graves that were around this mound. So that's a little bit of a background on Grave Creek itself, on Moundsville. And so here's the mound. And I think this photo, this is in what's that book, Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, Ancient Monuments. Yeah, I think that's what this book.
Look at how tall it is compared to that house, though. I mean, that's an earthwork. Crazy.
Yeah, that is a big.
Wow.
They think it's the second tallest, next to Monk's Mound in Cahokia. So that's kind of what they estimate, at least the mounds that are still around. And so at the moment, it was supposedly at one point the mound was about, let's see, 60 feet. They say it used to be 70. Now it's at 62 feet, is what it is. But they say that it was originally about 70 feet. And they say that from radiocarbon dating, the mound was constructed between 250 BC and 150 BC. And that's very important because that's Book of Mormon timeline. That's right there. And it's in the heartland. It's right in the center where there's a lot of activity. And it's right next to a river. I forgot which river. I should have looked that up, but it is next to a main river. And so like all river, highways, it's definitely a place to be looked at as far as, anything historical. Today, it's across the street from a prison. And from what we understand, a lot of prisoners have gone on and volunteered over there to do their service or whatever. But it is near a prison. So, but that shouldn't stop you from going to go see it if you're ever in West Virginia. So, so there's that. And then let's talk about the excavation. Now, Tomlinson, who founded the mound, who I think owned the property, his grandson, and I'm trying to pronounce the pronunciation of his name, Abelard. I think that's his name, Abelard. Abellard. Tomlinson is the grandson, and he obtained the mound. And when he obtained it in 1938, they went ahead and did an excavation of it to find out what was there. And I think they did it respectfully. It sounded like they really tried really hard to preserve what was there. At least that's our understanding. And then if you go to, you can see some of this, the base of the mound. They actually did a dig in the base of the mound. And you see that there's an E down there and it goes to an A. And so there's a chamber. And in that chamber, they found one male and one female skeleton. And they found 650 ivory beads, which came from the ocean. And when you see that it was a sign of trade. And other stuff you're going to see that were in here, you'll know that it was not indigenous to the area. So obviously, whatever was happening during this period was all being pulled from other places, just like Cahokia, just like Poverty Point. All of these places constantly will have elements that that commerce happened or trade or something where elements came from other places. And that's what makes these things very fascinating and interesting.
And it was a sophisticated civilization. It's not just like what the modern, the modern tribes were sophisticated, but you can tell that there was trade that was going on for thousands of miles. Things from Michigan, all over the place. It's really cool.
Yeah. And there could have even been a structure on top of the mound, for all we know. I know a lot of mounds will have structures on top, like temples. When you watch the old film Temples and Peace, that's one of the comments that they make about a lot of these places. That's another one for another day. But there's a Moundsville, Alabama, where there's a mound there, and this old film that's almost like 100 years old, but it's probably about 90 years old, where they talk about they're over there digging the mound and they're pulling stuff out, but they're saying that a lot of these mounds will have a structure on top, which could have been some form of worship of some type. Now, when you look back at this thing, you'll see that they also dug up on top, going down where it's E, and it goes into this box that says C. So they went straight down and they found another burial chamber, and they found one body there, and then they found 1,700 shell beads. And I'll just kind of go into this here. 1,700 shell beads, 500 univalve seashells. I don't know what a univalve seashell is. Do you know what a univalve seashell is, Mark? I don't
Nope.
know what that is.
I know
Uh,
they had mentioned that some of the shells were saltwater, and some were fresh.
yeah,
So I don't know if that's a difference, but maybe
yeah,
someone could comment
that's
below and
true.
help us out with that, because yeah, I don't
And
know.
then there is 5 copper bracelets. You can see the bracelets on there, which
They said the
again,
copper matched with the Michigan copper, so
yeah,
that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
good call on that one. That's right. So it's a 5 copper, again, not indigenous to that area. 150 drilled mica plates, which is fascinating. So, and
And
mica, I don't,
that diagram there that you're showing is how they think that they were presented together in a garment.
yeah,
So they don't
that's
know
true.
how it was set up, but the mica was from far away too. I actually did a little bit of reading about mica, but it didn't help me at all. I didn't really learn anything,
A
but I
darn
you
mica.
know
So,
yeah.
no, and that's, yeah, who knows where that came from? 2 gorgets. I don't even know what a gorget is. Do you know what a gorget is?
Well,
Is that like,
maybe a viewer could help us with what a
yeah, what a
gorget is,
gorget
because
is? One, and then drilled mica sheets, and then 1 engraved stone tablet. And that's what we're mostly going to talk about today. And so you can kind of see it in the little thing. It's the list of things that were found in there, and this tablet is the one that's under a lot of scrutiny, which is fascinating, because nobody will argue about the
their
mica or
artifacts.
the
Yeah.
bracelets or the seashells or the beads, but they'll
Mhm.
argue about the tablet. And so that's what
Yeah.
we're gonna go into today.
What's kind of interesting to me, and what I've noticed a lot, is whenever an inscription is found, it seems like all the other artifacts just get completely ignored.
Yeah,
And they tell an incredible story. Like at the Gravecreekstone, there were a lot of artifacts that were found, and each artifact, um, if there's a copper artifact, that's interesting because the Book of Mormon mentions copper an awful lot. So we're finding
constantly.
copper all over the place. So copper was an important thing to the people that built this mound. Um, but sometimes when there's an archaeological dig, there'll be one item that's found that's the focus for like forever.
That's right.
That's all we're going to look at, and the other items get ignored. So when you are reading and when you're looking at the evidence part, just make sure that you pay attention to everything that was found, not just the cool tablets that have writing on them, but the other items tell a story as well.
Yeah. As well as the skeletons, those tell a story, and how they were encased. That tells a
Hmm.
story, whether they were mummified or whatever the encasing was that they were in, if it even still exists. So yeah, so that's what's really I don't know what these chambers were encased in. That would have been a fascinating find as to what the actual boxing. But this speech given by Emily didn't say what physically it was in. They just said it was a chamber.
But
So
one thing that was interesting to me, and I don't know if it's interesting to anybody else, but they said the lower chamber was facing, I think, north south, and the
yes,
upper chamber was east west, and that was kind of an
yeah,
interesting thing to me, that they were actually pointed in specific directions, that there was a rhyme or reason to the way that they were buried.
yeah,
um
what that meant. Yeah, who knows what that would have referred
but it
to.
wasn't just like they're like, hey, we're gonna put a vault and we're gonna put a bunch of dirt. She also mentioned they know how it was built. It was, the dirt was carried in by baskets. And she kind of goes over how much dirt would have had to be brought in, and that I believe they found evidence of some of the baskets that helped carry that material in,
Oh
and they
yeah,
could
that's right.
they could tell that it was like that because of the way that the dirt was piled in. There was little pockets of dirt So it's just really interesting to think, what kind of how many people you would have had to have in that area to build that huge mound,
Yeah.
and it was important to them. It was important to to that people. So
Yeah, that's right. So no, that's very good points. And that's once again, that brings us to evidence of a people that's had somewhat of a population level and then they disappeared. And we don't know, where they went and in our case, as far as Book of Mormon research is concerned, it helps. It's right there. It's right where we think, and the timeline, according to them, is fits that era. So which is really
and
good.
it's a people that are definitely they were living and doing things a little bit differently than the modern Native American tribes.
That's right.
So, they have a different civilization. They're doing things differently. Their burials are a little bit different, and just kind of the items that they held that they were buried with are different. So it's we're connecting some dots here. So.
Yeah. So and it definitely, our feeling is the possibility is that it was their ancestors, which was fine that things changed over time. That's a long time for things to be somewhat different than how the natives were doing it over the last couple of hundred years versus 2,000 years ago. Some people think that it's not the natives and that it was somebody else. It totally could have been the natives. It's just their practices have changed over the years, and so there's nothing not there's definitely an education that's needed to do the things that they were doing, and so anything is possible. One last thing that I wanted to present was that there was crematories in places, so we know that there was a a way that they would burn bodies, and and other graves, other types of burials that were happening all around there. I don't have enough information on it, but they did show in the speech, which I don't have here, that there was crematories that were around there. And so now let's talk about what happened to the mound over in recent days. Recent meaning the last couple of hundred years. So look at the top there, Mark. So you see, it looks like they had built a tower right after they did their excavation. They went ahead and built that up top, and then in 1860, it says in the history that they built a saloon up there. So that's when things got kind of wild, and they had a saloon in 1860, and then in the late 1800s, they built a dance hall. So can you imagine, Mark, going up there, church dance, and you got to climb that hill, and then
right up top, that'd be good. And they mentioned that the mound is now shorter because of the different structures that they'd build, or they'd have to level the top to build a different structure. It's kind of an interesting thing to me because that isn't something that we would necessarily do right now, where we're like, oh look, there's a hill, let's build something up there.
yeah, can you imagine them building a restaurant on the top of Monk's Mound in
Yeah,
Cahokia?
build
So
a
I
nice
need something to
Chick-fil-A
eat.
up
Let's
there,
go up to
you
Cahokia.
know
Have a Chick-fil-A on the
right
top of
and but
Monk's
it's
Mound.
interesting to me that they're like they've got this dance hall, and they know that it's kind of it's a burial site. Like, it's just kind of a weird,
Yeah,
you
dancing
know
upon the
but I
graves of the
but I guess it's
natives.
you when you it's a prime example of um the idea that you own the land, so you're going to build on it, right?
Yeah,
You own it, and I think that you'll see that with the archaeology of North America, is that farmers came in and towns were established, and it wasn't the priority wasn't to preserve. If something was found, the priority was, well, I own this land, I've got to feed my family.
that's right.
I own this land,
Survival.
I need to put my business there. I own the property. I'm not just going to let it sit. I've got to pay taxes on it. I've got to put food on the table. So that's just kind of what you see. It's not something where as soon as something was found that people were like, well, wait, we've got to preserve it. No,
Yeah.
you see
Yeah.
this, you see the dance halls and the pubs and
it was a
whatever.
survival of the fittest, but it also was the Wild West. And even though this isn't like the West, it was still wild. It was still
Yeah, I
at a
mean,
point to where that, they just kind of, yeah, today they're a lot more careful about preserving things. You're an outcast if you dance upon a grave, a native grave, as you should be. I mean, that's
well,
just sort of
and now the pendulum is almost swung all the way over
a little
where
crazy. Yeah, that's
we can't go back. A lot of these places where we know are there still are artifacts, we cannot go and do further digs.
yeah, which
So
is which is
it's
crazy because
gotten
then you
kind of
can't
an
learn
interesting
anything.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't learn anything if you go to the pendulum swinging so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but
So
yeah, no, it's
imagine so right now, like if we were to go back to this mound, the Native Americans and the different tribes don't want anything to happen. They don't want it dug up, and it has to do with ancestors and things like that. But imagine, if you will, that same instance in Europe if they were like, oh well, we can't dig up Pompeii. We're not gonna do it.
yeah,
We're not gonna touch that because we, are there's ancestors that are buried there. So a lot of the North American archaeology there can't be the digs can't happen,
yeah,
especially places where we know where there are artifacts. So the
and that's
pendulum swung to a
that,
completely different spot.
and that's why you rely on history. That's why you rely, sadly, on the time when they could dig wherever they felt like, and they could kind of do what they wanted. And while that's kind of a rough time, it's also a time of learning where you're kind of, so you
Yeah.
kind of pull off of the words of, the Tomlinsons and whoever else on what they knew about the mound. And so that's why most of the time there's very few, if any, new digs going on
Yeah.
anywhere. And so we have to rely
And
on,
when people say, hey, nothing's been found, well, yeah, recently it hasn't, but there are books and volumes of artifact and
yeah,
museums, local historic societies, the University of Buffalo, kind of where I am. They boast of over 1 million artifacts, in their university museum that all date to kind of these time periods.
yeah,
So yes, the items have been found, but right now there's no real new digs because a Native American tribe will say, nope, you can't
yeah,
because those are our ancestors.
yeah.
So it's difficult right now. And the money, not a lot of people want to dig in North America because it isn't as attractive as finding, cut
That's
stone
true. There's a
buildings. And
financial aspect to it as
there's a
well.
financial aspect, when you can go to Central America and find cut stone pyramids, or you can come up here and find, an earthen mound. It's a little bit different. It's not as attractive.
Yeah.
So
So to finish up the what happened through the years, we know that in 1900 there was a plan to do for demolition for this mound, because obviously this was a town that was growing, and but it was saved by the daughters of the American Revolution, which is good that they were able to save it. And then eventually the mound was purchased by the state of West Virginia in 1909, and so that was good. Which takes us to the gravecreekstone. So the stone tablet, whatever you want to call it. It's the gravecreekstone was actually discovered on the top part of the mound going in, and so and into the burial. So it was part of the burial. So it was kind of with one of the skeletons, sort of in that area. Now, whether it was on the skeleton or whether it was off to the side, I don't know. I don't know exactly where, but it was when they got to that burial section, that one chamber, is when they found this along with all those other things. And so now the question is, what is it? And that's where the scrutiny kicks in. Now, there's a guy named Henry Schoolcraft, and Henry Schoolcraft is a name that we hope as we continue the research, you're going to hear a lot of, because he was an early archaeologist, like late early 1800s, before archaeology was really a full-on, science. I know when we talk about DeWitt Clinton and his study of New York and things, his fascination of it, Henry Schoolcraft is usually one of the other names along with him, and in that era of finding stuff. So that's why it's great to get to those earlier studies. Here's what he had to say. He pretty much had a great interest in the stone. So he really felt like there was a lot to be learned from it. The stone is about 2 inches by 2 inches, and it's a little oval shaped in the middle. So it's very small. And it's probably something you could wear as a necklace around if you wanted to, like a lot like Chief Joseph's tablet. You know how those things were really small and a little oval shaped in the front, and so this is like a little bigger than Chief Joseph's tablet. And one of the other, let's see, Mr. Raffin. Now, that's the way it's spelt, at least that I got. I don't know any more about Mr. Raffin than that he's a Denmark archaeologist. So Mr. Raffin, he says, here's a quote from him. He said, "It was so striking at first. At first sight, we are led to believe we have a Celtiberic inscription lying before us." And so I wrote the word Celtiberic.
Wasn't there an archaeological conference in Denmark,
Yes.
and they had like a copy of, they had a drawing of it, and they were like, "Oh wow, look what they're finding in America." So they kind of had a discussion over this item. So you have a lot of Europeans that are looking over the drawing and saying, "Hey, this is something." And of course, the gentleman from Denmark is like, "Hey, this is like ancient Danish or whatever."
Yeah. Yeah. For him, he claimed it to be Celtiberic. And what you're going to see is, which is fascinating, Mark and I were talking about this, that this will probably be one of the ones where you see more versions from experts. So these are people who are quote unquote experts, but their translations are all different. They're all over the board. Like there is no one specific way this is translated. And so, which is kind of fascinating. And it shows you that it's, that it's obviously, who knows? And we may never know until we actually get to the real truth of it. Here is so one of the things that happened was there were numerous versions drawn down. And so Edwin Davis, who is part of Squire and Davis with one of the early Smithsonian books, Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. So this is another book called Monuments and Antiques. Check out this title already. Monuments and Antiques Found in the Mounds, Tombs, and Ancient Cities of America. So that's a name you want to carry with you. Obviously, the length of the title didn't matter.
That's going to be the new name of our podcast.
Yes, I like it. Know. So very short, very thorough. Anyway, so these are sketches that are in that book, and you can see here, and they kind of varied. And because the picture you're seeing on the left is a photograph, it's the only photograph that we have of this tablet because the tablet is missing. And so this, what you see there is you see renditions of the tablet over the years, because obviously they didn't photocopy it. The Smithsonian actually made some casts of the tablet, so they made some copies. So there's only one photo, but now the tablet is missing.
They're really good at knowing where things are.
Oh yeah, boy, they keep stuff
Like they're
really
just like,
good.
oh well, we have this tablet and it's pretty important. We should put it somewhere where we can find it later. And then
Somebody was carrying it in their pocket, and then they came back to the Smithsonian with a different pair of pants and went, I don't know.
it
Maybe it's in
got
my other
it
pair of
it went out in the
pants.
wash. It got thrown out with the
Who knows? So, but the Smithsonian did make a cast, and so you can like see copies of it. But somewhere after that, it's gone, along with some of the
it's
other artifacts from that
it's
mound.
funny, like the Smithsonian made a statement that like, hey, there was only savages that lived in North America, and that's
Yeah,
it. It's because they're throwing out all the stuff that that shows
yeah,
any type of civilization. They're just like, well, yeah, these guys were just savages. They're just,
that's right.
you
Quick,
know,
get John Wesley Powell on it. So you'll definitely get it saved. Sorry. Anyway, a little Palmyra humor there. So, uh, yeah. So that's so there. So obviously, we now see that the conundrum has happened, and we don't have the original. Now we got this photograph, so that's the closest thing, and that's what you want to go off of when you're doing your research. Now, one thing that's interesting is that here are some examples of ancient text. You see the Greek, you see the Etruscan, you see the Phoenician, the British,
Phoenician.
the Old British, Celtiberic, Appalachian, and there's a lot of these that could have been, should have been, would have been. You just have no idea. It's a real mix, and so with
What
that comes all of these different translations. We're going to show you some of the different
what's
translations.
kind of interesting to me is like if you do pause this and look over these characters, like a lot of these ancient languages use the exact same
That's right.
characters.
Yeah.
So I can imagine how difficult it is to translate something because it's like, oh well, look at this little chart. And
Yeah.
this is just a small example of characters of ancient languages,
So you
but a
see,
lot of
like
them
for
are
example,
exactly the same.
you see the one line where it's a line, and then there's two lines in the middle. When you see that, so you can see one of the characters that has a line up and down that's vertical, and then you see two horizontal lines in the middle crossed over it. You
Yeah,
see that over and over in all of those. So obviously that's an
yeah.
example of a sign that is reused in many different. It's like the word no. The word
Or the
no.
little diamond, like that's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, the
it's
diamond
just
shaped
interesting.
one.
And that's
Yeah.
something that you don't necessarily think of in translation. Like we live in the modern world we have like the alphabet that we have now, and most languages use that, or if they're
Maybe
um
maybe we should run it through
just
Google Translator and it'll tell us what it says. What do you think?
yeah, we should. That would be, yeah, let's do that.
Let's do
I'm
that.
sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I kind of go through hey, we have fun with this, but so in 1876 was the first time that somebody actually called this tablet a fraud, which is interesting because everything else seemed to not be a fraud, but the tablet seemed to be a fraud, which is fascinating. By the Western Reserve and Northern Ohio Historical Society, they met together and said, "Look, it's a fraud," which is fascinating. But then, not long after, there were some archaeologists that had a meeting in Nancy, France, and they deemed the stone authentic and was made in letters of ancient Canaanites, or i.e., Paleo Hebrew. So that was another,
Interesting.
another interesting take. There's another guy named Mr. Bing, and we're going to talk about Mr. Bing here in a
Not
minute.
Mr. Bean, but Bing.
Not Mr. Bean, not to get confused with Mr. Bean, but Mr. Bing. So Mr. Bing is the creator of the Canaanite dictionary into French. And he said that the text on here was Canaanite and was actually kind of close to Phoenician. And so we're going to read his translation here in a minute. But
That's an interesting thing because like later we'll talk about evidence of the Phoenicians,
That's right.
North America, and
Yeah,
what
Phoenicia, definitely.
tie-in they may have, but it's really, really interesting that at about the same time there are people that are heavily researching into Paleo Hebrew and writing books. It's interesting how things at about the time where information needs to come forth, someone's doing the research,
Yeah,
and it's in France, and they're
that's
writing a book
right.
about it.
So here's some examples of translations, and these are kind of fun to read, but you can see none of them are like related to the other. It's just their options are all over the board. Whoops, I think I went back one. Anyway, so let's do this. Oop, there we go.
The translations that are the most interesting to me, like, you'd think that you first look at where was it found and what purpose may it have served.
Yeah, that's true.
So
That's
there
a
are
good
some
point.
translations that talk about burial. Hey, that makes sense.
Yeah,
And some
no,
translations
that's
are like, well, we'll go over the other ones that are like, oh, well, that's fun.
so maybe for you as the audience, as we go through these translations and nerd out for a moment, you tell
Yeah.
us which ones you think might be the closest. So here's Monsieur Maurice Schwab. And obviously he's, I don't
The
know if he's,
banker, right? Is
I
the
probably, yeah, I think he's a banker. This is the quote. It says, the chief of emigration who reached these places or this island has fixed those statutes forever. Whatever that means, who knows? Chief of immigration, whoever's working at the immigration office is praised in this tablet. So who knows? So talking about that. So here's Mr. Oppert. That's the only name I have on this research. I'm sure there's a full name there, but says the grave of one who was assassinated here. May God, to revenge him, strike his murderer, cutting off the hands of his existence. I think I misspelled existence. Forgive me for that. But hey, it's
you
this
can
is
blame it on
actually,
his translation. It's not you, it was him.
yeah. So that's I think that this is one that if it was Nephite time frame, and especially during the 250 to 150 BC, who knows if this, if that, so that writing would almost make sense, because the grave of one who's assassinated here, and if this was a piece that was buried in a grave, then
Yeah.
that's one possibility. Again, not exact,
And
but
during that time period, during the Book of Mormon, secret combinations rising up against, a government, the person that was buried in that mound was probably a leader. I can't imagine they were building mounds for, podcaster Mark.
yeah.
But they were probably a political leader of some sort. So it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thought. Again, we won't make it in stone, no pun intended, but it is fascinating for this as a possibility. So far, this is my favorite. Well, it's the most realistic. I'm going to show you my favorite after this. So here's Monsieur Bing, and he said that he's the one who created the Canaanite to French dictionary. He said, thy orders are laws. Thou shinest in thy impetus, Elon and rapid as the Chamos. And from what we understand, Elon and Chamos are animals, I think. If anybody in the audience knows what they are, please let us know. That'd be fun to find out what an Elon and a chamois.
And if Elon and Chamois lived in North America.
Yeah, if they were people or if they were animals. I think she said, Emily said they were animals. I think that's what she had mentioned. But he believed it was the text of Canaanites, of Canaanite background. Barry Fell, our favorite America BC book. from the Book of America BC. His came out to be the mound raised on high for Tasak or Tasach, which from what I understand, is a god. To this tile, his queen caused to be made. So that's another option. That Tasach, I don't remember what god that was, or I've heard of it, but I don't really remember if that what that is. But anyway, that's his translation. Here's a fun one. This one was done just like 10 some years ago, 11 years ago, by Stuart Harris, and he claimed that it was ancient Finnish. I think that's what he said. So again, a different take on it. And Champion Lovely created the best family. This is line 1. I think of a wife far away in a meadow, line 2, of a woman also at night, naked in a small cabin. Now, which that goes for, that, Mark, that would actually go with the nightclub that they built on top of the mound. So could have gotten wild, and that's what this guy saw. Who knows? Continuing line 2. Now a storm of storms struck. Line 3, us. It created grief, wrecked everything somewhat, started a battle among men wretched. Line 4, I made many great champions. And this one, this is the least likely, but one of the things you saw, and I didn't put it on here, but like you see the very bottom, it says line 4, I made many great champions. Now, if you look at the tablet, there's no real line 4 except a line and a slash and a squiggle, kind of a squiggly face or a squiggle something. And what this guy did was he broke it up like it was like one little line said this and this other longer line said this, and that's how he got I made many great champions, which is fascinating. I don't know how you come up with that with this. So this is kind of, in my opinion, the least likely of what the translation is, but it is a translation nonetheless.
But it shows you like the background of the person. They're an expert. He's an expert in Finnish.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to try to make it fit, and how many, we had like 4 translations, or was it 5?
Yeah. Well, I've got one more. So here's another one right here. Bam. So this is from last week's episode. Wind gust welcome the crossing over swiftly, turning high. So remember, this is turning high lord distinctly thou art, sea voyage together, welcome hand to me in bow, rainbow to me. And of course, so you can see I misspelled. So there's that word distinctly again. And this is from the discussion last week, where I think it was Alan Wilson. I'm going to botch the name of the guy who did this, but he was Welsh. He was the Welsh translator who translated the Brandenburg stone, and then he went and translated a bunch of other stones with Kolbrin, the Kolbrin language. And so he's saying this is Kolbrin, and that this is Kolbrin translated. So, hey, as you can see, many different translations from many experts. So we've read at least 5 of them right here. And I think there was more, but these are at least the ones that we have that we saw in this speech. And it's really fascinating. So it proves to us one thing, and that it's not absolute. And so we have to be very careful of it. And in fact, with those experts comes the hoaxes. And that's what I want to talk about for a minute here. Hoaxing, I'm calling this little section hoaxing the hoaxes, because that's kind of what happened. So the story goes is that a newspaper tried to label this stone like 100 years later. Like this newspaper came out in 1920 something. I can't remember. I forgot to write down the date of the newspaper, but it was in the 1920s, 1930s. So 100 years in, and writes this, you can read on there, it says, solves the famous Indian stone hoax. And they say that that they had, that when you read the letters of this of that are written there, that it comes out to, and their translation says Bill Stumps Stone, October 4th, 1830. But the problem with doing that is they had to kind of alter the letters to do it. So that's problem number one, is that they had to kind of alter the text to make it sound like, oh, it's not real. It was this guy, fooling them. They were stumping them. And so somebody just threw it in there while they were digging and pulled it out, and oh, look, it's solved, ta-da, it's a fake,
Yeah.
and
Well, and part of that is, I don't know what newspaper this is from, but
I don't
you're
either.
trying to sell papers.
Yeah.
I know that they said that, what was it, Mark Twain's brother was part of the dig, or the original dig,
Yeah.
and
His nephew, I think.
they were trying to recoup some of the money, and the way they were trying to do that was to show the stone. And I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I find it, with every artifact that's found, um it just seems like there's a huge group of people that are like, yep, it's a real artifact, and there's always a group of people that are like, no. And there are articles written to or for, and there are articles written against. So
Yeah.
it's just
Well, and
difficult, and
that's,
without having the artifact, like with it being lost, it's hard to do any further, you know
yeah.
to look at it. We do have the photograph, but it's just hard to be able to analyze it any deeper.
Well, Emily
So
talked about that the analysis of this article was false, because when you look at the actual texts that they tried to translate to make it look like, oh, it's just them being funny, they, in order to do it, they had to go in and mess with it. So they had to kind of stretch out the letters. That's why it's zoomed in there. They had to kind of stretch
yeah,
out the letters and make it look like, oh, look, it's us stumping you, Mr.
yeah,
Tomlinson, or whatever, and ha ha ha. But one of the problems is that obviously they messed with the letters, and the other thing is that the excavation was finished by August of 1838. It went from April to August, I think, and they wrote on here October 4th. So they got their date wrong. So they're totally off by several months. And so they can't, they totally messed up their own hoax. In other words, they totally screwed it up. And so it's, so that's one thing. And here's the other, and this is this is more recent. This guy named David, and I can't pronounce his name, Oestreicher, Ostricher, or something like that. So I'm just going to say David. We're just going to call him David. So David, in 2008, gave a lecture at West Virginia Archaeological Society, and his lecture is called Forging the Gravecreekstone. Who did it and how was it done? And
who done
so,
it?
he gave this lecture, and this is part of what you were saying, Mark, that Mark Twain's nephew, Mr. I think is it Matthew Clements? Its last name's Clements. Had money. He invested on the excavation, and they weren't, supposedly, according to David, they weren't finding much, on the excavation, and so what he did was he found, supposedly Clements had found this book from 1752. It's a book on alphabets, and it's written in Spanish, but David claims that Clements used the book, and he said on his argument was that every letter on the tablet was found in this book, and he even said, and some were even in order. A lot of it was in
Complete
order.
phrases. Yeah.
Yeah, like certain phrases. But here's what's interesting is that if you Emily herself, the woman who gave the speech, took it upon herself to do a scan of the book. And she said, while many of the letters did appear in the books, and this is a sample of the book, some of the samples, she said, while many of the letters do appear on the stone from the book, she says she hardly found any, she didn't find any where a lot of the letters were actually in order. She found one, and that's, if you are able to zoom in on your device while watching this, there's one in green. You'll see a bunch of yellow highlights, but then there's one in green, and this is her highlights. This is what she did, and she showed that it was kind of a loose argument, because that's kind of like saying, like if you hate Donald Trump, for example, and you say, well, Donald Trump loves chicken sandwiches and I love chicken sandwiches, so that must mean I'm a racist like Donald Trump because we both like chicken sandwiches, or whatever, somebody's argument is. It's so loose.
It's a logical, it's a fallacy.
Yeah.
Well, and the interesting thing that she points out is this gentleman gave a presentation, but he never published
Oh, good point.
his presentation. And it seems like his background is in finding hoaxes.
Yeah.
So
that's all he's there for.
I mean, he was probably trying to do an honest job and find a hoax with this. But by him stating that, look, they lifted it from this book and complete phrases and characters. Well, yeah, the book is written about ancient characters. So if it's an ancient people that came from somewhere else, that use those same characters, yeah, they're going to use them. It's not like they, just conjured up a language from nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
They came from somewhere, and we, on our podcast and with Hidden in the Heartland, we're showing proof of people coming to the Americas from different places, and bringing their culture with them.
That's right.
So I almost didn't watch her presentation all the way to the end, and I'm glad that I did, because this was an interesting, she went through the book and kind of did her own thing rather than just trust what the gentleman said, that it was just, it's a hoax and this is why. Said, hey, let me find this out for myself, and maybe I'll confirm what he said or come to a different conclusion.
That's right. That's what she did, and that's what makes this research fun and ongoing, because there'll always be a different piece. Like you said, the gravecreekstone. There's the gravecreekstone, but then there's all the stuff around it. And that helps solidify what it is. We've only heard of the gravecreekstone, but we haven't heard of all the other things.
There's been several times where I've read something, and we're not going to go into this right now, but I've read something, and it's even been like with the history of the church. I've read it, and I've been like, oh, well, this is someone's conclusion. And then I've gone through and I've done my own research, and I've said, wow, like maybe that conclusion wasn't quite right. So it's important when you're looking at this to, find out for yourself. She even admitted, hey, I don't read Spanish. The book's written in Spanish, but she could go through and look at all these figures, all these drawings that were made of these artifacts, and she could highlight it on her computer. Took her a little bit of time, but definitely worth it. You
know how to see lines. Yeah, that's what she was saying. I can read lines, and we all can read lines.
She doesn't know how to read Spanish, what the book was written in. She doesn't know how to read the ancient languages, but you can definitely compare. You can compare characters here.
That's right. That's right. So good point. So one last thing I'm going to bring up is the witnesses who saw the stone. So there was a couple of pluses and minuses. One of them I wanted to bring up was Mr. W.R. Mercer. Now, Mr. Mercer claims, and this is in the fraud camp of the gravecreekstone. He says that Mr. Mercer says that the postmaster, Mr. Borman, that's the postmaster, okay? Mr. Mercer says Mr. Borman, who's the postmaster, knew the man. You see, we're already at, person number 3, who made the tablet and put it in the ground, and his name was David Gatewood. So supposedly David Gatewood put it in the ground. Mr. Borman saw it, and Mr. Mercer said that Mr. Borman said that Mr. Gatewood did it. What's funny is so far,
and he knew that they were going to be digging, because he was
that's right. He knew, he's like, I know what's going to happen here, so I'm going to make this little thing.
He happened to know.
Stick it
right around the area where the bodies were buried.
And I know this is going to cause trouble. Yeah, exactly. It's hilarious. And so, but to this,
he probably went into the Smithsonian and he took it back.
That's right. Darn him. Darn those friend. Gentiles. So anyway, but and I guess there were some people who tried to go to David Gatewood's family to get more proof of that claim, and there's been they don't know anything. The family knows nothing really about Mr. Gatewood faking anything. So that's kind of interesting.
Even if he knew about rocks,
yeah, maybe he just hated the postman. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows what his mail came late or something. So now on the flip side, there is a Mr. J.E. Wharton who states, I guess in written testimony, that he was present in 1838 while Mr. Tomlinson and his friend were at the mound and when it was open. And he said, quote, "I know there could have been no deception." So he said, that's just going to happen. And it's really fascinating.
That's interesting because he was there. He talks about the other people that were there, and they know that he knew they were there, and they knew he was there.
So that's right.
It's kind of
and that's probably going to happen.
Conspiracy where they're like, "Hey, let's all agree that this stone was found," because
because that millions. People are gonna question it down the road.
Yeah.
So anyway, as always, we hope you enjoyed today's discussion that we had. We want you to comment and then subscribe, like, and share. Do that all in one. So we're still trying to raise money to make season 3. So go to our Give, Send, Go fundraiser page. I always put it in the link in the comments section, and Mark and I have been having fun doing this, so we want to keep it going. If anything, we'll at least keep the podcast going, but we can only do it with your help and your support. So subscribe to this channel, put a little like, give us a little thumbs up, share it with your friends on Facebook, wherever, whatever device you use, whatever platform. We hope that you enjoy this discussion. We'll be back. We will be back again next week with another episode. And as I get out of here, though, look at that. You can see us clear as a bell. Enjoy the research and keep doing it on your own and find things. And when you do, don't be afraid to write it in the comments or even message our YouTube channel. We do have a Facebook page, like our Facebook page. And then anything else, we would love to hear from you in any way. One thing as a reminder, we did do a book giveaway and we had a winner, and we've tried to contact the winner and the winner has not responded. So if we'll keep trying to contact you, but William Faulkner is who won the book giveaway. So
if you're listening, and you can do a direct message to the Hidden in the Heartland Facebook page with your address, I would love to get this book sent out to you,
that's right,
so that you can enjoy it. So
anyway, so excited to to keep the research going. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.